Aloha, everybody. My name is Teresa Robertson, and I am a doula, birth photographer, and portrait photographer in Hawaii. I received my photography degree from the Savannah College of Art and Design, and I have gone through doula training with Donut International, and I'm currently in the process of getting certified as a doula. With the COVID-19 outbreak and all of the changes happening throughout hospitals, I am also working towards virtual doula services, which I'm really excited about, and actually have a couple of clients I'll be serving that way in the near future. This series of live interviews is inspired again by the mass changes that have been going on throughout the world, and really the different scenarios that we've been seeing playing out in the birth community, specifically how women are and are not able to birth in the way that they would desire these days. I thought for a while how I could contribute in a positive way, rather than just kind of, spewing out like the latest data sometimes it feels like every hour, but how I could contribute in a positive way to either expecting parents or parents who had just given birth. And I just kept thinking about like, we need community and conversation. And so that's how the idea of these live interviews started. That is it. Today we have on a special guest named Stephani, and she has gone through 4 different births, and she is going to kind of talk about that. I thought it was, a really interesting time throughout these conversations. We've, kind of, especially for the women who have talked to me that have already given birth, that they, we're kind of seeing the similarities of their birth stories versus what could potentially be happening today, and take those little nuggets of wisdom with us. But it's interesting because with Steph, when she comes on, she's going to be talking about how all 4 of her births, we're not exactly the same. And sometimes we think when we give birth the first time, we think we know exactly what it's going to be like. But a lot of times it's that second time that we think it's going to be just completely identical, and we've got it in the bag and we know what we're doing, and just things don't turn out that way. So I'm about to bring her on right now. See, hold on just a sec, Steph. Here we go. I can hear you.
Oh,
hi.
Hey. Let me know.
Yeah, you're on. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I'm just trying to figure out my setup because my headphone cord is in the bottom of my phone, so I'm trying to figure out how to prop it up.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't even think
No, that's
about
fine.
that. Yeah.
It's fine. If
We're
I start
still
yelling,
learning
let me
as we
know.
go.
I'm not used to talking through headphones, so
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like I just talk louder as I keep going.
Yeah. Eventually these will be like on Zoom or something, but until some of those get, some of those concerns get taken care of, then we're
No,
just
it's
going
fine.
to keep it on Instagram Live for now.
Nope. We're good.
Good. So, thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
First of all, did I get your story somewhat correct I know I didn't really like dive into a lot of details, but you have gone through 4 births
Yep.
that have not all been identical.
Right.
So
I was trying to
when you
figure out if I had to connect to my internet or the LTE, so I kind of had to rejoin when you were talking towards the end of it. So I didn't catch all of your recap, but I'm sure it was accurate.
Yeah. So what are your initial thoughts when somebody says they know what they're like, oh, I'm about to give birth, like, so I know what's going to happen?
I guess my first response would be, don't expect things to always go the way you're planning.
Mm-hmm.
you have to be okay with change.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're in a hospital or if you plan on giving birth naturally without medication, or if you think you're going to make it to the hospital, because so many things can happen. And then if you are just so stuck on having a picture perfect, planned out birth, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, more times than not, you would be
Yeah.
disappointed, but
Yeah.
it happens.
It does. It does
So
happen. And I think it's,
I'm not saying everyone's disappointed in having birth. I'm just saying, like,
yes, exactly.
if I always ask my doctors, why am I planning? They would say, get your birth plan in order. And I'm like, do I have to make a birth plan? Because what if something goes wrong? Or what if something
Yeah.
doesn't happen in my birth plan? Is that bad? Like, what is
Yeah.
a birth plan really doing?
Yeah.
So
Well,
props to those who have birth plans. So,
well, and it all kind of depends on, I mean, a couple different things come to mind is first of all, like so many, like the birth community has really been rallying together lately. And so every day I'm part of like just group conversations and group
yes.
chats. And we're talking about, like how, especially as doulas, we can be the best that we can. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that was being discussed in today's conversation with one of the midwives was, um, what a negative connotation the word contraction has with it.
Yeah.
And that's why some doulas or birth workers will choose to say things like waves. And I think we we put such a negative connotation as well with when we talk about change, like
Yeah.
changes to how you think you want to give birth. And I
Or
think
how your pregnancy can be too.
exactly. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that is so important, and I think if you get in the right, community of birth workers,
Yeah.
they will drive that point home that you do need to be open to changes.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, for me too, even my birth plan, even if you're planning on having a home birth, we discuss even like if you were transferred to the hospital, like we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but let's
Right.
just touch base on a couple of things. Or if something were to arise and you thought you were going to have a home birth, but now you're being transferred and you're going to have a C-section, let's just touch base on
Right.
that really quick. We don't need to dwell on it, but
Yep.
rather than like the phrase I always use, go to the hospital, have a baby, go home. Go
Yeah.
to the hospital, have an epidural, have a baby, go home.
Oh
Like,
my gosh. And that went through my head so many times with mine that, I mean, it just, we were lucky. So
yeah.
there
So
were
tell
times
me,
when I was just like, just going to have baby.
yeah,
I'll be home in 24 hours.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So tell me about your first birth and kind of like your pregnancy
okay.
leading up to that first birth.
Okay. So my husband, Ryan, and I, for those who don't know, but we got married in Jamaica in the late February of 2010, and then had our firstborn son in the middle of January in 2011. So just a month shy of our 1 year anniversary, we had him. And I mean, not to go too far back, but like I worked in childcare for a couple of years beforehand. And so, in terms when you were referring to like people's expectations for pregnancy and birth and stuff, I really, really like rally and I'm like pro conversation about talking to other moms about their experiences and what happened and what went wrong and the pros and cons and what they chose and why. It fascinates me. Birth fascinates me. Just everything about it does. And so then working through childcare, I was like, oh, sweet. I got this in the bag. I know how I'm going to raise my kids because I got like 15 other families of kids that I can see how they parent or like how their kids turned out or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I would do this or I wouldn't do that. So I kind of went into it thinking like, yeah, just going to have kid, come home from the hospital, no big deal. Like, whatever. And so thankfully, like only being a year or two out of playing college basketball, I was still in shape somewhat. I had it in my head, like, I'm going to work out during my pregnancy. I'm going to be super healthy. And then when I found out, I'm trying to remember when I found out I was pregnant was the day that Ryan started ripping up sod in the front yard. And we had to like rent a sod stripper, and he was like tearing up the front yard because we legit like tore up the grass and we're paying for sod to come in. And I was like, I'm going to go for a run. Because I just found out I was pregnant, and he was like spending money on redoing our lawn. So thankfully, like everything was good and the pregnancy was good. I didn't end up, oh, hang on a second. My cat does not bother me. And then all of a sudden I'm talking and it like walks right in front of the camera.
It's usually either the cat or the kids, so don't worry.
I know. So sorry, I was just thinking we decided I had been to an OB here before because we didn't grow up here. We're in Grand Rapids, and I had been to an OB before, but decided to use a family OB that was convenient for us. And because I felt comfortable and I knew that Ryan would be able to help with the birth. And so we went through him and everything was great. And I didn't end up working out through my pregnancy, which was fine. I mean, when you're there, you realize how hard it is. But I did work full time in childcare still. And then when I got to the end, I will never forget, I was at work one day and like I squatted down to get something out of a drawer at work for the kids because it was almost lunchtime. And I was like, oh man, I think I'm like not peeing myself, but I was like, ooh, I should probably run to the bathroom. So I did. And then, I mean, like within 5 minutes later, I was like, oh my gosh, seriously, is my bladder this weak? Like, what is going on? I think I went to the bathroom 3 or 4 times within like 15 minutes. And then I was like, I went to my coworker and I'm like, I don't know what is going on, but I seriously just keep like peeing my pants and I cannot hold it in. I don't know. And I'm cracking up because she's like, well, don't go to the hospital. They're just going to send you home, tell you peed yourself. That's what happened to me. So I'm like, okay, crap, So then I go into my boss's office and I'm like, does anybody have like a pad or something? Because I mean, it's lunchtime. I'm like, I just can't hold it in. My bladder's crazy. Like I was a week away from my due date and they're like, you need to call your doctor. And I was like, no, so-and-so told me like, it's fine. Yeah. I'm fine. I feel fine. Like I'm just leaking, whatever. And they're like, no, you should probably go to the doctor and just get checked. And I was like, I'll be back after lunch. See you later. Went on my lunch break to the doctor. I think I called you and I was like, I don't know what this feels like.
No.
I don't know if you remember that, but
yeah.
And then when I went, they were like, oh yeah, your water's ruptured. And he was like, go home, do your laundry, clean your house, wait till the contractions get bad. And then when they're unbearable, go into the hospital because once you go in, you're not coming back out until you have a baby. And I was like, what?
So you weren't prepared at all.
I mean, we were prepared. Like we had all of our baby stuff, but I was like, no, I'll be back after lunch. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wasn't due for another week. And I thought for sure I would be having the baby like 2 weeks late just because everything had gone so smooth. And so when that happened, I was like, what do you mean we're going to have a baby in 24 hours? So then we went in. So then when I was at the doctor and he was like, yeah, your water ruptured, where do you want to go? And I was like, what do you mean, where do I want to go? And he goes, well, what hospital do you want to go to? And I'm like, well, we had planned on going to hospital A. What hospital do you want to go to?
Gosh.
And he's like, well,
So
let's just go.
you're
Let's go to.
like true off the birth plan.
Yeah.
Like you're like,
Because we had gone to hospital A the whole well, no, we hadn't gone to hospital A because he was a private OB family doctor. So I wasn't going to a hospital. I was going to a family doctor that did
right.
OB and prenatal and labor and delivery.
Right.
So I wasn't showing up to a doctor, but he was registered, like he was more well known in this other hospital and he was more comfortable there. He knew the staff, blah, blah,
Did you take
blah. And
childbirth
so
classes or?
I did. We did with our first, yes. We went
Okay.
through the hospital we thought we were going through, and we did birth classes, we did breastfeeding classes, we did a tour.
At that point, did you have to pre-register or anything?
Maybe. I don't remember.
Okay.
It was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. But he was like, where do you want to go? And I'm like, well, you're obviously asking me for a reason. So where do you want to go? So then he's like, well, let's go to hospital B. And I was like, okay, whatever. We'll meet you there. He's like, I'll have your paperwork transferred in by the time you get there. So I'm like, all right. So we went home. But then it was one of those things where it's your first one and you don't know. And so, I mean, I kept, my water was broken and I didn't know what contractions were. So by the time I was like feeling contractions, I'm like watching Teen Mom and like Birth Story on TLC. And Ryan's like, why are you watching this? And I just kept thinking, like, I just feel empowered by like other women giving birth while I'm like in labor. Like it just felt natural for me to like feel what they're feeling and stuff. And he's like, this is so weird. You shouldn't be watching other people going through pain while you're in pain. But it just was comforting. But then at a certain point, I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should go. I don't know. I'm like, I had no idea when. I didn't want to have it. I just knew I didn't want to have it in the house or the car on the way there.
Right. Right.
So, I mean,
So
when we got there, I think I was at like a 3. I was like dilated to a 3. So.
Had you thought of any type of support at that point in time, or do you feel like
What kind of support?
Like, I mean, obviously, I feel like if you weren't even sure what hospital you were going to, you probably hadn't like researched having a doula or anything like that.
Oh no.
Okay. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
All I knew is that I wanted Ryan to help deliver the baby.
Right.
Which at first he was opposed to, and then we worked him into that.
Okay.
So then at that point I was like, okay, well, I knew, mom was 2 hours away and my sister-in-law had 2 kids already and we were close. And so I knew she was coming to take pictures. And so, I mean, that was our birth team, was Ryan, my mom, and my sister-in-law to come to be there. And yeah. So that was my support.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
So you had somebody and you had something.
Yeah. Yeah. So. And then obviously the doctor, like we knew him. So I knew that he would be super honest and not necessarily, he's not like a comforting person, but I knew, like, all emotions aside, he would get the job done and tell us, what needed to happen.
So, and I mean, a lot of this is, how do you feel about this in hindsight? Because I know that there were times, I know what it's like to be quote unquote on your own a little bit more, like throughout labor and delivery. I kind of think you got it. And now I'm in a position to look back and think like, oh my gosh, if I could do it all over again. Like, I know, like, it's my personal decision that I wish I had more support.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it just works more with your personality where you were just, like, or is it just that you just didn't know enough to know better to ask for like
Yeah.
more?
I don't know if I needed support or would have asked for it any more than I had, other than, I don't know. I just, part of me is like, I don't want a ton of attention on me. So
Mm-hmm.
the less I have to be in appointments and hospitals, the less I have to deal with people asking me, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's,
Mm-hmm.
that first, we spent 2 nights in the hospital, and it was like every 30 minutes, like taking your blood pressure. And I'm like, is this really necessary? Like, we got lucky that I did have an epidural. I remember struggling to get to the point where I could have an epidural, but once I got it, I was all right. I think I pushed for 40, 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 8 pounds, 2 ounces. And then he was fine. And I feel like I knew enough from talking to enough people about like breastfeeding and stuff. We did breastfeed. It was a boy. We had him circumcised. That's probably one of the things that I would reflect back on a little bit more, in terms of cultural and choice, which I'm not against either one. I'm just saying, like, that's something I think I would have researched a little bit more,
Yeah.
had we known, but we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. And I don't know if I think it was just assumed.
Yeah.
So, but in support, I was kind of just like, all right, going in, having a baby, baby's here, leave me alone. He's fine. He was eating.
But they kept coming
Let's,
in. And
yeah, I mean, that
did
was
you
like the
ever,
biggest thing. So,
did you ever ask to, that's something that we talk about a lot with people, is when, especially when describing the role of doulas, is after all of this energy, not only having labored and given birth,
yeah,
but now you're connecting with your newborn child, and grant in your scenario at this point you didn't have any other children, but if you
right.
have other children, you're
Yeah,
also now connecting with them. They're connecting with their new baby,
yeah,
plus you have your partner, plus everybody, like
yeah,
all this dynamic. So you've got this person who is dedicated to take that energy away from you, to say, hey, they actually just want a little privacy right now. Like,
yeah.
is this absolute, is this something that
Yeah,
we
that would have
can?
helped. I mean, that changed with the second one too. That was one of the
Yeah.
reflections back with my second. We stayed 24 hours, and I was like, peace out, I'm going home,
Yeah.
because I don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night.
Right. And the thing is that after you've spent all that emotional and mental and
Yeah,
physical energy doing all of this, the last thing you want is to put that extra energy
yeah,
towards, I mean, advocacy can seem like such a strong word, and people would say, well, what do you mean I need an advocate? Like, what,
yeah,
I don't really have any extenuating circumstances. And it's just even small things
yeah.
like that. Like, can we
Well,
please
yeah,
just have a moment?
yeah. And and two, looking back, like, I'm not saying that the nurses were just bothering me. Like, they were
No,
doing
no,
their
no, no.
job.
Yeah.
And looking back to, um, our first son was, I look back at pictures and I'm like, he is orange. Like, I remember a little bit him being on the borderline of jaundice, and I know like they were checking his bilirubin levels and stuff, but I was like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I did not realize that he was that orange at the time. So, I mean, they obviously were justified in terms of like making sure he was healthy, making sure I was healthy. It just was one of those things where, it's it's inevitable when you're in a hospital, and they want to make sure you're healthy, but at the same time, it's like when you go through it and you're like, yeah, I'm fine, but you've never gone through it before. It's kind of hard to say, you know
Yeah,
just
it
give me a
is.
minute.
Yeah, I know.
So, because you just
Well,
think that's
because
how it is.
you're
That's
in
just
such
how it
a,
is.
right. And it's harder too, I think, when on the one hand you have no choice when you're in the throes of labor and delivery, but to trust the people
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
But also simultaneously, you're in this protective mode
Right.
at the same time. And so, you know, on the one hand, what do you do? Do you just kind of go with the flow and hope for the best? Or do you start, you know, pushing away the, you know, potential
Yeah.
help or support? You know, I remember those feelings as well, where um being in the midst of a lot of pain, and a nurse said to me, she's like, you're pretty nice, you're one of the nicest patients we have for the amount of pain you're in. And I was like, I need you on my side. I'm like, and I'm
Yeah.
afraid if I'm anything but sugar sweet, which is not what I should have been focused on at that point in
Yeah.
time. But I was
Yes.
afraid if I didn't, you know, if I didn't get her on my side, she wouldn't help me. And that
Yeah.
like desperation of like, I need you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a choice.
I do remember like just being the nurses, especially in delivery, like the physical act of delivering the babies. I was like, I love you. I don't remember your name. I don't remember what you're going to look like in 12 hours, but I love you.
Yeah.
Like, and then afterwards, like even the ladies, you're there, and then in the middle of the night when everyone else is sleeping and you're up because your adrenaline's pumping from just having a baby, and they're coming in, and you're like, at least you're the only person I have to talk to right now because you're up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that too. But I mean, it's one of those things where like I look back and I could not tell you or remember the faces or the names of any of the nurses that helped
Right.
during my delivery and my stay and everything. But I do remember like the love that I felt for them
Mm-hmm.
because they were the ones that spent the most time with me. The doctors just come in and
Right.
deliver the babies and peace out.
Which that's even, it's interesting talking to people, especially hearing the different perspectives of going into birth, and you know, at the wide range of, I've got, you know, I've got a team, I've got a team of
Yeah.
people, I know who my team is, they all have really specific, you know, ways that they're going to help us get through this and focus and make it enjoyable and pleasant, and you know, I trust my team. And then the, you know, the opposite end of the spectrum, where you just are going through this and kind of, you know, just people that you happenstance meet throughout this labor and delivery, regardless of who you have, a lot of the best memories are those people we connect
Yeah.
with.
They like become your team,
And that
which is part of
support,
their job. But yeah,
right.
it's
But
very
at the end of,
important.
yeah, at the end of the day, you're going to get some level of support, you're going to get
Yeah.
some level of care. What level you
Yeah.
get and what that connection is,
Right.
isn't necessarily right or wrong, but it can vary and it
Yeah.
can be important.
And we were lucky, like just having positive
Right.
experiences with those people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure
Did
that there are
you
horror stories.
did you have, with all four of your births, did you feel that way? Did you feel like all you had like just exceptional encounters with every
I
birth?
think especially the nurses that helped while I was in labor and postpartum, yes. I mean, which is the important part. So,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I don't have any complaints with any of the experiences with like staff members or
Right.
nurses because again, I think that they're not that it's their job, but it is their job. But part of that job comes with the compassion of understanding. I've had nurses where after I've given birth, I'm like, I need to pee. And they're like, honey, because I had an epidural, they're like, are you sure you can get up yet? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Just help me, you know. And they're like, your body just went through something traumatic. And I'm like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I just had a baby. And they're like, no, like your body just went through something. Like this is a trauma.
Yeah.
And I just had like that word stuck in my head at one point. And I don't remember which one it was, but I was like, you know what? Like they at least can see that and they have compassion for it because it's hard work. You can talk about it and make it sound easy, but it's not. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and it's trauma. It's physical trauma to your body. So the easiest birth is still a traumatic physical experience, and not in a bad way. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
And
but
you,
it's just that, yeah.
how many different places did you give birth at?
4 kids in 3 different locations.
Okay.
So by the time, I don't know how much time we have, but
Yeah.
I was going to say by the time, you know, number 2 came along,
Mm-hmm.
my first OB was not delivering anymore.
Okay.
So we had to go, and I just reverted back to the OB I had been seeing prior to having kids. And she was super nice. Our first son was just a year old when we found out we were pregnant again. So back to back, boom, boom. And it was one of those things where I feel like now that thinking back, I didn't actually see my doctor until I was 30 or 32 weeks. I think 32 weeks pregnant because of the hospital rotation for nurses, or not nurses, but for doctors.
Yeah.
I would just go in and kind of see whoever's available. And I think I made it to 32 weeks without even seeing the doctor that I was assigned to. And then when I actually went in to give birth that time, again, this is a different hospital than our firstborn, different doctor, different hospital. She wasn't even there. It was just whoever was on call.
Yeah. Yeah. Those
So,
changes, the change in the healthcare system with that,
yeah.
just, 20 years ago, it just seems like there was such a major overhaul of,
Yeah.
yeah, how they did things.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. That I think is the most unfortunate part of it because the way, and I know they have to schedule a certain way, but it's one of those things where, you get your assigned doctor Monday through Friday if they're working or over the night. But if you go into labor on a weekend, different doctors are on call every weekend. So you just kind of cross your fingers and hope you go in when your doctor's assigned.
Was it with that way as well with your last 3 births?
Well, that one was with my second.
Right.
And so again, we didn't see my doctor until I was 32 weeks. And then I saw her for like the last, 4 I think 4 checkups, maybe even just 3. And then she wasn't even there for the birth. But at that time I was working full time, went in to the hospital, dilated to a 6. So I was just like, hey, I'm here. I'm at a 6. I need my epidural. And then ended up needing Pitocin because the epidural actually slowed me down. And so she was 9 pounds, 3 ounces. But with with my third, at that point, I was like, I don't really want to go through that again. I don't want to have to worry about doctors, not seeing my doctor, or I don't know, like it didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth, but I was like, this isn't really what I was looking for again.
Mm-hmm.
So then I switched hospitals again and went to hospital number 3 with another new doctor. And I loved her. I mean, she was my favorite one by far.
Why?
So why?
Mm-hmm.
She was super sweet and almost like calming. Like I could sit in with her. There were a couple appointments I had that were blocked around lunchtime that I was like, I am so sorry. We were like talking about her having kids and me having kids and just like our lives and her being a doctor. And I'm so fascinated by birth anyways, that we were just like connecting and communicating on that level. And then I'm like, I am so sorry. You probably have patients waiting. And she's like, no, it's fine. It's my lunch break. I can talk for an hour if you want to. So like, she just was super sweet and super like calming in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
not,
Again, that connection.
yeah. And then, yeah. And so I actually had her for my third and fourth, and then she stopped delivering. So
And was she
Yep.
actually there for the deliveries?
She was. She
Nice.
was. And Ryan was able to help with all of them except for our second born because her
Nice.
shoulder got, it was
Oh,
shoulder
dysplasia.
dystocia,
Hmm.
dysplasia. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they like shoved him out of the way and were like on top of me trying to get her out. And then she
Hmm.
was fine. But I guess everyone else told me it was scary for a second there, but I didn't remember. I was
Yeah.
hungry. I was
Yeah.
like, feed me a I said, I need a sandwich. And they
Yeah.
were like, yeah, just hang on a minute because she's like being taken care of because apparently she was like blue for a half a second.
Oh,
I didn't know. I was
yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I did have the same doctor for number 3 and 4
Okay. And I know you said
at a third hospital. So
so your husband with the first one didn't even know if he wanted to be like super involved in the actual birthing process, but then
at
like
first, yeah.
how did he kind of evolve throughout each of the births?
Um, he got to a point where he was like, well, in high school, we watched a cadaver like dissection. So I feel like if I can watch that, I could probably watch a baby being born. And so I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So I think he just kind of rationalized it that way. Like, if I've seen one end of graphic, you
Yeah.
know, then I can probably help deliver my own child.
Yeah.
Um,
That's very nice.
which I understand some husbands cannot handle it, but I highly recommend at least having your spouse involved.
Yeah.
There's just something about that connection because the mom is birthing. And I always say, I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, I'm laying on a hospital bed and everyone's staring at me and poking at me with needles and stuff, but you just get to sit by and watch.
Yeah.
Like,
Now, you're in a different area of the country than me. You're in Michigan. Do you feel
right.
like that's a little bit more of do you feel like that's, I want to, like, I
Common.
don't want to generalize, but like, do you feel like a lot of fathers in, like, that's normal
I
for a lot of the men in that
I can't
area?
tell you how many conversations he's had with other parents who have said, oh, yeah, you just reached in there. And he was like, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And they're like, no way, you did it. You did? He's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I helped like
Yeah.
when I could. It's,
Yeah. It's interesting because like we always talk about our culture as a nation, but like all the little regional
yeah,
cultures within, just within states and within
yeah.
counties and within.
And I think that if I didn't ask, that's another part of it is like looking back is if I did not specifically say, when do we talk about the birth? And they'll be like, why? The doctors are like, why? Is there something specific you want? And I'm like, yeah, I want my husband to help deliver it.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a little truth in giving the power that doctors hold. In reason, if everything's healthy, if something happens, obviously they have the education and the knowledge and the equipment to help, you know, in times of need. But as long as everything is going okay, like it's just kind of one of those things where moms are just expected to go in and the doctor delivers and nobody asks otherwise or second guesses. And so if I wouldn't have gone in and said, when do we talk about the birth? Because I want my husband to help deliver, they wouldn't have asked or offered. They wouldn't. I'm
Yeah.
like, you need to
Yeah.
get him a gown and some gloves.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. I had a similar experience where
yeah,
same thing. It was, I finally asked, and
yeah,
it was the question of like, well, why, what do you think's going to happen?
yeah,
Um, and then I started listing out, different things that I did want, the way that I wanted it ideally to go. And I was hoping to be educated on that. But I thought that they were going to come to me with the education. I didn't
Yeah.
know at that point in time, especially, because we didn't have the support that we have now. It was so long ago that when I started listing things out, they just looked at me like I was crazy and were like, if that's the type of birth you want, then you don't need to come back.
Oh,
And end a conversation.
wow.
And at that point, what do you do?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's where I feel like the power of conversation happens,
yeah,
because doctors are going to go in, again, it's their job. It's what they're trained to do. They're going to go in and say, you can have an epidural, you can not have an epidural, you can sign this. Even though you don't want an epidural, you can still sign this so that if you change your mind later, you can have one. This is, we're going to give you fluids, blah, blah, blah. But they never say, like, with my firstborn, we did the hospital tour. They said, yeah, we have birthing suites. I think at one point, like, I had to envision in my head, like, yoga ball, bathtub, suite. I can come in and labor and sit in a bathtub
yeah,
until I can't deal with it anymore. And that's not what we got at all.
yeah,
But I was like, well, I'm already in labor. What am I going to say now?
yeah,
But it is one of those things where it's like, if you don't ask for it, they're not just going to be like, do you want me to get you a yoga ball? Do you want to come sit in the bathtub? Do you want a birthing suite? Do you want a doula? Do you want your husband to help deliver? Like, that's not their job. Their job is to check you in, get you hooked up to IVs, get your fluids, get your labor going, and get you out. Like, or get the baby out. But,
yeah.
I mean, so it's not their job to.
But you don't know that going in. You don't know
Right.
it's not their job going in.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's why I said that's where the power of conversation happens, because if you don't know that you need to ask these questions, there are so many different birth experiences that women go through where you can kind of like gather your own information and be like, I never would have thought about my husband helping deliver the baby. And I know that Ryan's talked to dads that are like, oh, yeah, if we ever did have another one, I probably could have helped too.
Yeah.
Like, but you just don't think about it because it's
They don't know
not
what they
like
don't
it's
know.
offered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's different to not even have that. I mean, and that's a whole different discussion why that
Right.
wouldn't even like come to mind.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is there's a big difference between not even knowing, and I mean it goes for the partner of the birthing person and the birthing person themselves.
Yeah.
If you don't even know what to ask and
Right.
you don't even know what your options are,
Right.
then
I mean, we went through birthing class and everything, and I don't know if I got that idea from the birthing class
yeah,
or not, but I mean, again, it was just one of those things that I had in my head where I was like, if I have to go through all this, you can help me.
yeah.
But again, I mean, they might have covered it in a birthing class. About like parent or spousal participation, but yeah. But you're right. Like, if you don't know, like women who either don't go to a birthing class or can't go to a birthing class or don't have the support or don't have other women to talk to, don't have family. I mean, I can't imagine going into a hospital trying to have a baby without anything like family support or anything.
How do we change that?
That's where again, the power of conversation, I guess the power of social media, but also just conversation of talking about things like, oh, hey, did you know what happens after you give birth to a baby?
Yeah.
Because that's still something 9 years later that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been longer than 9 years because you've had kids that are, you have had kids older than that where I'm sure, no, I don't know if you talked to anybody about it or not, but I don't think I think you're the one that made the comment to me that you were like, if you get an epidural, it's not just helping for the birth, it's helping for all the stuff after the birth too. And I mean, that's true. Like, that's one of the things that's like, you're not just going to pop a baby out and then go on your way and walk home and
Yeah.
call it good. Like, again, it's a very traumatic experience, and with every trauma comes recovery. So you have to like be okay with the, I don't know, the messiness that comes along with bringing a life into the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Absolutely.
you're, what did I see? If you're not okay getting pee on your hand when you're taking a pregnancy test, you're probably not ready for getting. I mean, like, it's messy from the beginning, get go.
Right.
Like, so, but post birth for
Yeah.
sure is not talked about enough.
Is looking back on your four births, is there, I mean, granted, it doesn't sound like you had, any self-described trauma or,
No,
anything necessarily that was alarming, but looking back, is there anything you would do differently to have made it a better experience?
not in, I mean, not necessarily in the physical birthing process of being in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. It's, excuse me, it is what it is. I mean, at the
Well, and that's
time,
what I mean. Like, not
yeah,
just it
you
is what
don't,
it is. Like,
right.
how would you really, like, you mentioned wanting to be in a bathtub. Like,
Yeah,
I think we're so used to just being like, well, I'm okay. And
yeah,
being just okay with that when it's like, wait, wait, wait. Like,
yeah,
but if it could be like your dream,
yeah.
like,
I think the little more, I don't know if I could have handled it at the time of my
mm-hmm.
life is the thing. I don't know if I could have handled anything any differently than I did.
Yeah,
Um,
which is
because
fine too.
yeah, I worked full time with the first and second and part time with the third during pregnancy, and then decided to stay home after my third was born. And so going back in terms of like, I was working full time, had my first baby, and then he was only a year old when I got pregnant again and was working full time with a second baby. And then they were only like 2.5 and I think 2 and 3.5, or 2 and 4, and then got pregnant with my third. Well, by that point, I had gone down to part time anyways. And so I knew like I was going to be staying home after our third was born. But in terms of like labor and delivery, it's kind of one of those things where you're going through life in different phases. And with
Mm-hmm.
our first, I was so young, I didn't really know any better. I don't know if I could have handled
Right.
like the unknown. I was just like, I don't really want to have a baby in the bathtub, and I don't really want to have in the car. And the second one, same thing. I was like already dilated to a 6 when we went to the hospital, and I was like, don't really want to have it in the car because we have these expectations of being at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until like the third and fourth that I was like, well, it's your third and fourth. Your body's already gone through two, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
guess if I went into labor and had it at home, like, women have done it before, but that's where the power of education and conversation come in with other women, and you're learning more about birth experiences and like, oh, check out this lady. She just birthed a baby in the creek in the middle of the woods. Like, holy crap. Like, that's pretty cool. I mean, not to say it's everyone's cup of tea, but that's when
Yeah.
you start being like, oh, wait a second.
You
Like,
start
yeah,
being empowered by other
yes.
empowered
I
women.
think that's the thing, is the empowerment by other women's experiences.
Right.
So again, I don't know, physical delivery and everything. Like, I don't know if I could look back and really change anything, because
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned something from each one and kind of
Right.
evolved with each one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I necessarily could have handled myself 9 years ago,
Yeah.
who I am now 9 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's hard to like then look at a 23-year-old woman expecting her first child to be like, okay, but listen,
Yeah.
you can't do that. You just have to be like, you have choices and you do have options. And if you're not comfortable, or if you feel like something's not the way you want it, that's an okay feeling. And it is okay to say something or speak up or change something at the last minute. I mean, with my first baby, my water broke and I was sitting in the doctor's office and he's like, what hospital do you want to go to?
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, what do you mean? I have a choice? Like, what do you mean, what hospital? Like, can we do that? Is that legal?
Yeah.
And I think that actually might have helped, because I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, whatever.
It's like there really are just so many different layers to, it's not just about, as you know, as humans and as a culture, us not only discussing things like postpartum,
Yeah.
but also the physical birth, also what's happening during labor, but like well beyond we even get to that point, how are we not making this a normalized conversation?
Right.
And then how are we not encouraging others to be open to those conversations in a way where we're not telling them horror stories
Right.
and traumatic birth
Or
stories
judging.
and or judging, or like all of it, like how there's a lot of work to be done, and there's so many different layers that need to be addressed. And so
a lot of different layers, and still it's 2020 and a lot of different conversations that need to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of those conversations have to happen between women because we're the ones doing it. We were very lucky and very fortunate that our births went pretty according to what we expected. We did not have to have any C-sections. I didn't have to have any surgeries. I didn't have any complications other than like the babies being big. And like, 8 pounds, 9 pounds, 10 pounds, and 9 pounds, 12 ounces big. We had to be induced, but I've heard horror stories about inductions. So I kind of had a preconceived notion of how bad it could be. And we got lucky that it wasn't. It's the power of conversation and the empowerment between women that needs to happen. But you can't do it if you're not confident talking about it either. Like going through postpartum or having complications, child loss, stillborn births. I mean, it's that and miscarriages. It's all wrapped in. And unfortunately, the women are the one who bear the burden of that, in terms of your body is physically growing another human being. And so if we don't
and that's
talk
also not
to
a
each
shameful
other,
act.
no. And if we don't talk about what our bodies physically go through, how are these 23-year-old women having their first time babies supposed to know? How are they supposed to know what's could happen, but could we possibly prevent postpartum a little bit more by talking a little bit more? Or empowering each other a little bit more? Because that was one thing I went through with our second. I didn't know. I mean, I went through almost a full year before even knowing what it was. I just thought I was going crazy. So I didn't have anybody talking. We didn't. Nobody talked. Nobody, I've had conversations with coworkers since then where I was like, that was the worst year of my life. And nobody would have had any idea. So nobody said anything. But
like you said, just kind of, and that's one of the reasons why I do this. And have been, just to also, like, if people feel like they can't get that physical communication or physical connection right now, like just at least feeling like they've got a space to come to where they can
Right.
just even, not even necessarily walk away with some earth shattering information, but we can
Right.
just be in each other's presence. And
one of the things when I talk to women who either are just, I don't know, it's just this thing I have where I'm like, how are you?
yeah.
How are you doing? I so many times have had people be like, oh, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah.
But my curiosity going through it firsthand is, no, I'm not saying how's it going. I'm saying, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you doing? And it is okay if you're not okay. And if you have no idea how you're doing, that's okay too. But you got to think about all of the hormonal changes, the physical changes, and the emotional changes, and the lifestyle changes.
All of it.
Placed on the shoulders of women. I mean, sorry, men, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
And men, I don't know, I feel like not just men, but like spouses in general don't necessarily always know how to handle postpartum, whether it's the postpartum recovery, whether it's recovery after a C-section, whether it's postpartum anxiety and depression, whether it's going back to work after having a baby. And it really does, again, come down to other women connecting. And how do you find that? There's programs, I know, if you can access them. I know there's support groups and stuff. I've never been lucky enough to be able to do anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been times when I'm like, on my own. But no shame in going to counseling. I mean, I've done that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it got bad. Ryan will tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how far you want to go into it, but like, it got to the point where I think I put my 2 weeks notice in without even like talking to him at work.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then finally he like came to work and was like, you need to call a doctor.
Yeah.
So it's an ever-changing process.
Yeah.
But
so
yep.
We do need to wrap up.
Yeah.
But did you, I mean, again, going back to, it's not just about these conversations about the actual labor, the actual delivery.
Yeah.
Like, in needing to have like very far ends of the spectrums, different conversations. Do you feel like you have got, like, as after your second birth, like for the third and the fourth, did you feel a little more armed with information? Did you?
Yes.
For that? And did you feel a little more? Okay.
We went through, not to like get super deep into it, because